Snow fell like knives from the dark sky, cutting against her skin as she walked alone through the ruins. The world had been this way for as long as she could remember, cold, broken, and endless. 10 years had passed since she had last felt warmth on her body. 10 years since the war had destroyed her people's homes, since her own family had vanished into fire and smoke. She was only a child then, but the years had turned her small body into something thin, scarred, and tired. Each night, she searched for a place to rest, but there was never anything soft, never anything warm. The stones she slept on froze her bones. The metal scraps she curled under burned like ice against her skin. She learned to curl up tight, arms wrapped around her ribs, trying to keep her heart alive. But the cold was not just in the air. It was inside her too, crawling through her veins until she felt more like ice than blood. She whispered to herself each night the same words, words that kept her spirit alive. Just one warm bed. Just once, please. Her voice grew weaker as the years passed. No one listened. No one cared. The colony had scattered, the survivors had chosen sides, and a girl like her was nothing. Sometimes she would see groups of her own kind pass by. She would try to approach, but the moment they saw her, they turned their backs. Some called her cursed. Others said she was too much trouble to feed. Hunger carved lines into her body, and the cold carved them deeper. She learned to hunt rats and dig roots from frozen ground. She learned to drink melted snow, even when it burned her throat with dirt and ash. Her hands cracked and bled every winter, and she wrapped them with cloth she tore from old ruins. She was not a warrior, not a fighter, just a shadow trying to survive in a world that seemed to hate her. Sometimes she dreamed of her childhood. In those dreams, she saw her mother tucking her into a small cot, covering her with a soft blanket. The smell of cooked food filled the air, and the warmth of a fire danced on the walls. But always, she woke to find only dust, only cold stone beneath her back, only the sound of the wind howling through broken towers. Those dreams hurt more than hunger. They reminded her of what she lost and what she could never find again. One night, as the wind screamed, she found a small corner of a destroyed building. She crawled inside, hoping for shelter. The walls leaned dangerously, as if they could fall at any moment, but she had no choice. She pressed herself into the corner and tried to sleep. Her body shivered so violently that her teeth cracked against each other. She pulled her knees up to her chest and whispered her old prayer. One warm bed. Please. Just once. Tears froze against her face as she whispered, and for the first time in many years, she felt she might not wake up again. But the next morning, she woke. The cold had not taken her yet. She dragged herself back to her feet and walked on. Day after day, night after night, it was the same. Empty ruins, frozen ground, no shelter, no hope. And yet, she kept walking. Something inside her refused to give up, even when her body begged her to fall. She saw lights sometimes in the far distance. Sometimes they were fires. Sometimes they were only tricks of the snow. Once, she followed one for a whole day, thinking it was a camp where she might beg for warmth. But when she arrived, it was only a burned-out wreck, still glowing from heat trapped in the rubble. She burned her hands reaching toward it, but she held them there anyway, desperate to feel anything but cold. Her hair grew tangled and wild. Her skin turned pale like the snow around her. People who saw her from a distance thought she was a ghost haunting the ruins. Perhaps she was. She moved like one, silent and slow, her bare feet leaving marks in the snow until the wind erased them. She had forgotten the sound of laughter, the feeling of hands holding hers, the comfort of voices. All she knew was silence, except for the whisper she kept alive in her mind. One warm bed. As the 10th year came, the cold grew sharper than ever before. Winter buried the ruins in snow so deep she sometimes had to crawl. The air cut like broken glass, and she felt her strength fading. She wondered if this was the year the cold would finally win. Still, she walked. Still, she searched. Still, she hoped, though the hope was small and weak. On one of those nights, when her body could no longer stop shaking, she lifted her eyes and saw something strange in the distance. It was not the faint glow of rubble. It was not a fire dying out. This light was steady, warm, alive. It flickered against the falling snow, brighter than anything she had seen in years. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she stared. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her legs felt heavy, but she forced them forward. Each step was like dragging chains, yet she could not stop. The light pulled her, called her, promised her something she had begged for every night of her life. For the first time in 10 years, she let herself whisper a different word. Not please, not one bed, just a single word that trembled on her lips as she stumbled closer. Hope. The ruins stretched around her, broken and dead, but that light did not vanish. It grew brighter the nearer she came. Her chest ached, her legs shook, her body begged her to fall, but she kept moving. She knew she had reached the end of her cold years. Either she would find warmth tonight, or she would die reaching for it. The light drew her closer until she could see its source. A small cabin stood at the edge of the ruins, its wooden walls standing strong against the storm. Smoke curled from a chimney, and orange light flickered behind a window. She stopped, afraid it was another trick, but the smell of burning wood reached her nose. It was real. For the first time in 10 years, warmth was real. Her legs trembled as she moved forward. The snow crunched beneath her bare, cracked feet. She raised a weak hand and knocked against the wooden door. The sound was so soft it was almost lost in the wind, but inside something stirred. Footsteps. Slow, cautious footsteps. Her heart pounded. The door creaked open and a man stood there. A human. His face was lit by firelight from behind, his shadow stretching across the snow. His eyes narrowed as he saw her. Thin, shivering, hair wild, eyes desperate. He looked ready to close the door again, but she spoke before he could. Her voice was a broken whisper, the last strength left inside her. Please, just one night in your warm bed. The words hung in the air. The human froze, his hand gripping the door tightly. He studied her with suspicion. He had been warned that aliens could be dangerous, that they could lie and trick to survive. She saw the doubt in his eyes and feared he would shut her out like everyone else had. Her knees gave way, and she fell forward into the snow. The cold bit deeper, and she could not lift herself again. She looked up at him, her lips trembling, her body shaking uncontrollably. Her whisper came once more, softer this time. Just one night. Please. The human stood still for a moment longer, then let out a breath. He could have left her to die. He could have shut the door and forgotten her. But instead, he reached out and pulled her inside. The rush of heat was like a dream. She gasped as the fire's warmth touched her skin, her frozen body almost unable to believe it was real. The cabin was small but strong, its walls sealed against the storm. A fire roared in the stone fireplace, casting golden light across the wooden floor. She could feel it on her face, like soft hands pressing against her frozen skin. The human dragged her closer to the fire and dropped a blanket over her shoulders. She clutched it with weak fingers, burying her face in the rough cloth as tears streamed down. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Warm? It's warm." The man stared at her, still unsure. He moved carefully, as if she might spring at him. But as he watched her shaking form, her thin frame wrapped in the blanket, his suspicion slowly softened. She looked nothing like a threat. She looked broken. He brought a bowl from a small pot hanging over the fire. The smell made her stomach twist in hunger. He set the bowl in front of her. Steam rose from the soup, simple but rich with flavor. She lifted the spoon with trembling hands, spilling half of it as she tried to drink. Her lips burned at the heat, but she didn't stop. She swallowed greedily, every sip pulling life back into her. "Slow," the human said, his voice firm. "You'll choke." She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes, then nodded quickly, obeying. She slowed her eating, but each bite felt like a gift. She had not tasted anything warm in years. Every swallow was like fire pushing away the cold inside her. She wanted to thank him, but her throat closed with emotion. The human sat across from her, his rifle resting near his hand. His eyes stayed on her, cautious. "Who are you?" he asked at last. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. I was left behind. My people, they went to fight. They never came back for me. 10 years, no bed, no fire, nothing, only cold." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not stop. "No one gave me shelter. No one gave me food. I begged, always begged, but they turned away." The man frowned. He had heard stories of aliens, proud and merciless, but the girl in front of him was nothing like those stories. She was small, weak, and tired, a soul that had been beaten down by the world. She looked at him again, her eyes shining in the firelight. "Please, just tonight. Let me stay. Tomorrow I can go. Just tonight." The man's jaw tightened. He glanced at the door, at the snow still falling outside. He thought about the dangers, about what it meant to trust an alien. But then he looked at her again, curled under the blanket, holding the bowl close like it was her only treasure. His chest ached with something he had not felt in a long time: pity. Finally, he gave a short nod. One night. Her eyes widened, and she pressed the blanket closer. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half laugh. She lowered her head and whispered, "Thank you, thank you." He didn't answer. He only stood and checked the windows, making sure the shutters were closed tight. He placed another log on the fire, its crackle filling the silence. She curled tighter near the flames, her body finally beginning to calm. For the first time in 10 years, her shaking slowed. But even as she drifted near sleep, fear remained in her heart. She knew kindness was fragile. She knew he could change his mind, that he could throw her out if he decided she was a risk. Her fingers gripped the blanket as if holding on to her only chance at life. The human sat awake, staring at her across the fire. He did not trust her, not yet. But he could not deny the truth he saw. She was broken, desperate, and honest in her need. He could not harden his heart enough to send her back into the storm. Outside, the wind howled and snow buried the world in silence. Inside, for the first time in 10 years, she felt heat against her skin and the soft cover of a blanket around her. She lay on the floor near the fire, whispering her old prayer again. Only this time, her words were no longer hopeless. One warm bed, just once. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in 10 long, cruel years, she believed she might wake to see tomorrow. The fire burned low, filling the cabin with soft orange light. She sat close to it, wrapped in the blanket, her eyes half closed, but still watchful. The human sat across from her, his rifle leaning against the chair within easy reach. His eyes stayed fixed on her, sharp and cautious. He had given her food, he had given her warmth, but trust was not something he could give so easily. The silence between them stretched long. The only sound was the crackle of wood and the faint whistle of wind outside. She felt his gaze on her, heavy like stone. She knew what he was thinking. Was she dangerous? Was she lying? She wanted to tell him she was no threat, but her throat tightened with fear. She had been cast aside so many times that words often failed her. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, steady, but edged with suspicion. "Why are you here? Why my door?" She pulled the blanket tighter, her thin fingers clutching it as if it could protect her. "I saw the light," she whispered. I thought it might be the end of my cold years. I only wanted to be warm." He narrowed his eyes. "And if you're lying? If you brought others here?" Her heart thudded painfully. She shook her head, her tangled hair falling across her face. "No. I came alone. Always alone. 10 years alone." Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook as she whispered again, "I have no one to follow me. No one even looks at me." The human leaned back slowly, his eyes searching her. He wanted to believe her. She looked weak, half-starved, more like a shadow than a danger. Yet he knew the world too well to let his guard down. He stayed silent, watching her, listening to every breath she took. She tried to eat the last of the soup, but her hands trembled so badly the spoon clattered against the bowl. She looked up at him with wide, wet eyes. "Please, I won't hurt you. I only need this night." He did not answer. Instead, he stood and checked the door, sliding the heavy wooden bar across it. He closed the shutters, then placed more wood on the fire. His movements were careful, deliberate. He wanted her to know he was prepared. As he sat again, her ears caught something strange. A sound. Faint, outside the cabin. Not the wind, not the storm. It was sharper, like footsteps crunching against snow. Her body stiffened. He noticed it too. His head turned toward the door, his hand sliding toward the rifle. His eyes narrowed as the sound came again, closer this time. The firelight flickered against his face, making his expression hard and cold. She whispered, panic rising in her throat. "They came?" "No, no." His voice cut through the air like steel. "Who?" Tears filled her eyes. I don't know. I don't know." She shook her head wildly, fear twisting inside her chest. "I came alone. I swear it." The human didn't move from his chair, but his finger rested near the trigger. He glanced at her, measuring her every reaction. Was she truly afraid, or was she pretending? Was this the trap he had feared? The noise outside grew louder. Crunch. Crunch. The sound of more than one set of feet. He stood quickly, moving to the window, pushing the wooden shutter open just a crack. His eyes searched the night. For a moment, he saw nothing but snow and shadows. Then, figures. Dark shapes moving between the trees, slow but steady. He closed the shutter at once, his jaw tight. He looked at her again, and she could feel his anger boiling beneath his calm face. You brought them. Her eyes widened, her whole body shaking. No, I didn't. I swear it on my life. Please believe me. Her voice broke into sobs, desperate and raw. She slid to the floor, clutching the blanket tray, as if the cabin itself would throw her out into the storm. The human's eyes stayed hard. He did not lower the rifle. He walked to the door and stood there, listening. The footsteps outside stopped, as if whoever was out there had frozen in place. The silence pressed against the walls of the cabin. She crawled closer to the fire, hugging her knees, whispering to herself. Not again. Not again. Don't throw me out. Please don't throw me out. The human glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. She looked like nothing more than a broken child, terrified of being cast out into the cold. If this was an act, it was perfect. If it was not, then she was more helpless than he had imagined. Minutes passed. The footsteps did not return, but the weight of them lingered. The human finally stepped back from the door and lowered his rifle slightly, though he kept it in his grip. He turned to her and spoke in a voice low and sharp. If you lied, if you brought them here, I'll know. And if I know, it will be the last thing you ever do. She nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. I didn't. Please believe me. He studied her for a long moment, then finally sat again. His eyes never left her, even as the fire crackled and the warmth filled the cabin. She could feel the distance between them, the wall of suspicion still standing tall. Her breathing slowed, but her chest still hurt from fear. She curled closer to the fire, her voice weak as she whispered, I never wanted to bring danger. I only wanted to be warm. The human stared into the flames, the firelight flickering in his eyes. The footsteps outside haunted him, but so did the truth of what he saw before him. A girl with nothing but pain in her heart, begging not for riches, not for food, but for one single night of warmth. The storm outside howled louder, rattling the shutters. Inside, silence held them both, broken only by the crackle of burning wood and the sound of her soft sobs fading into the night. Neither of them slept. He kept his rifle close, and she kept her whispered prayer alive. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would decide what to do with her. Tonight, she would stay. Tonight, the question of trust would wait. But the danger outside was real, and in his gut, he knew it would return. The fire burned bright, filling the cabin with a golden glow. She lay on the floor near it, her thin body wrapped in the blanket he had given her. The rough cloth scratched against her skin, but to her, it felt softer than anything she had ever touched. For 10 years, she had only known the bite of cold stone and frozen ground, but now she felt something different. Warmth. It sank into her bones slowly, making her eyes heavy. The human sat in a chair nearby, the rifle resting across his knees. His eyes never left her. He could see the way she trembled, not only from the cold leaving her body, but from fear. She looked like she didn't quite believe this was real, as if at any moment he might order her out into the storm again. He knew trust would not come quickly. Not for her. Not for him. Her breathing slowed as she pulled the blanket tighter, curling into herself like a child. For the first time in 10 long years, her body began to relax. Her eyes fluttered closed, and a soft sound escaped her lips, almost a sigh. She whispered into the firelight, her words so faint he almost missed them. Thank you, thank you. Then she drifted into sleep. The man kept his watch. He had lived alone for too long to be careless now. His ears stayed sharp, listening for the sound of footsteps outside. He did not forget the shadows he had seen earlier, moving in the snow. His finger stayed near the trigger, but his eyes sometimes wandered back to the girl sleeping on his floor. He saw how her lips moved in dreams, how her fingers clutched the blanket as if afraid it would be stolen from her. Hours passed in silence. The storm beat against the walls, but inside the fire kept them safe. The human thought about pushing his chair back, resting his own eyes for a moment, but something held him still. He could not trust her, not yet. He could not trust the night outside either. Then it happened. A sharp cry tore through the quiet. Her body jerked violently, and she sat up with wide eyes, screaming words he could not understand. Her hands flailed at the blanket, kicking at the floor, as if she were fighting invisible chains. Her voice was raw, filled with terror. "Don't leave me! Don't! Please!" The human jumped to his feet, rifle raised, scanning the cabin for danger. But there was nothing, only her, lost in a nightmare. He lowered the weapon slowly and stepped toward her. Her eyes were still closed, her body trembling, sweat glistening on her forehead despite the cold. She sobbed as she clawed at her chest, whispering broken words. He crouched down beside her and reached out carefully. His hand touched her shoulder, firm but not rough. "Wake up," he said, his voice steady. "You're safe. Wake up." Her eyes snapped open, wild and wet. For a moment she didn't see him. She saw only shadows of her past, faces that abandoned her, hands that pushed her away, nights of cold stone cutting into her back. Then her gaze focused, and she saw his face in the firelight. His eyes were sharp but not cruel. His hand stayed on her shoulder, steady, grounding her. She gasped for air, her chest heaving as she looked around. The blanket had fallen to the floor, but the heat of the fire touched her skin, reminding her that she was not outside, not alone. Her lips trembled as she whispered, It was a dream." He gave a small nod and stepped back, allowing her space. "A nightmare," he said. "You're safe here." Her body curled again, but this time not from cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking with silent sobs. "Every night," she whispered, "for 10 years, the same dream. I am left in the snow. I call for them, but no one comes. No one ever comes." Her words broke, and she buried her face in her knees. The human stood quietly, his rifle still in his hand. He did not know what to say. He was not used to comforting anyone. His life had been hard, filled with battles, filled with silence. But as he looked at her, fragile, broken, trembling, he felt something stir in his chest. He set the rifle aside and placed another log on the fire. Its warmth grew stronger, pushing the shadows back. He spoke at last, his voice low but firm. "You're not outside now. You're not alone tonight." Her eyes lifted to him, tears shining in the firelight. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to his words as if they were truth. Slowly, she picked up the fallen blanket and pulled it around herself again. Her body still shook, but the fear began to fade. The man returned to his chair, but his eyes did not leave her. He stayed awake, watching the fire, watching her, making sure the nightmare did not return. She lay down once more, curling tightly, but now when she closed her eyes, her breathing was calmer. Hours slipped away. The storm outside softened, and the cabin was wrapped in silence again. The fire crackled, and her breathing grew steady, her face less tense in sleep. The human leaned back, his own eyes heavy, but he forced them to stay open. He had promised her safety without saying the words, and he would not break that promise. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, the girl stirred awake. Her eyes blinked open, and she saw the fire still burning, the blanket still around her, and the human still sitting in the chair with his rifle close. A small sound escaped her lips, half relief, half disbelief. She whispered softly, so soft he almost didn't hear. "You stayed." He looked at her, his face unreadable. Of course. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She only pressed the blanket closer and let her eyes close again, this time without fear. For the first time in 10 years, she had passed a night not in the cold, not in the dark, but in warmth and safety. The human sat silently, staring into the fire. He told himself it was only for one night, but in his heart, he already knew the truth. One night would not be enough. The sun was hidden behind heavy clouds when morning came. Snow still covered the ground outside, white and endless, but inside the cabin the fire burned steady. She sat near it, holding the blanket tight around her shoulders, her eyes heavy but alive. For the first time in years, she had slept in warmth, even if her dreams had chased her with fear. The human stood near the window, pulling the shutter open just enough to look outside. His face was tense, his jaw set. He had not forgotten the footsteps in the snow the night before. His hand rested on the rifle at his side. She watched him silently, afraid to ask what he saw. Then it came. A sound. Heavy crunching footsteps moving closer through the snow. More than one. She froze where she sat, her heart pounding against her chest. The human stiffened, gripping the rifle tighter. He turned his head, his sharp eyes catching hers. "Stay quiet," he said firmly. She pressed her lips together, the blanket trembling in her hands. The sound grew louder. Shadows moved outside the cabin walls. Then came a voice, rough and cold, calling out in her language. She understood every word, and her blood turned to ice. "We know you are in there. Hand her over, human. She is ours. Her body shook violently. She covered her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Her kind had found her, the ones who had abandoned her years ago, the ones who now wanted her for reasons she did not dare speak. She looked at the human, fear shining in her eyes. She expected him to give her up, to push her out into the snow and close the door behind her. That was what everyone else had done before. But the man did not move aside. He stepped to the door and slid the heavy wooden bar back into place. He raised his rifle, his voice hard and sharp. "No one's coming in here." Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, not believing what she had heard. He was standing between her and them. No one had ever done that for her. The voices outside grew louder. Another alien shouted, "She is worthless to you. She is weak, broken. Hand her over and we will leave you in peace." The human's reply was cold as steel. "She asked for shelter. She has it." The silence that followed was heavy. Then came laughter, cruel and mocking. "You protect her? Then you make yourself our enemy." The sound of weapons clattered outside. Her stomach dropped. She knew what would come next. The human's eyes never left the door. His finger curled near the trigger. He had fought before. That much she could see in the way he stood, in the way his face did not break with fear. But this was his cabin, his only safe place, and they were many. She crawled closer to him on shaking knees, clutching his sleeve. "They will kill you," she whispered. "If you give me to them, they will leave. Please, save yourself." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had spent her whole life being unwanted. She could not understand why he would risk his life for her. He looked at her, his eyes steady and firm. "I won't hand you over." Her lips trembled, and her heart pounded. No one had ever said those words to her. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the pounding on the door shook the cabin before she could. The raiders pushed against it, but the wood held. Snow shook from the roof as the force of their blows echoed inside. The human raised his rifle, aiming at the window. He fired once, the sharp crack splitting the morning silence. A scream rang out from outside. The aliens shouted in anger, their voices promising revenge. She pressed herself against the wall, her hands over her ears. Fear flooded her body, but mixed with it was something new. Hope. He was fighting for her. The pounding on the door stopped. After a long silence, one of the voices called out again. "This is not over, human. We will come back, and when we do, not even your fire will save you." Their footsteps retreated into the snow, fading into the storm. The cabin was silent again, except for the sound of her fast, uneven breathing. The human lowered his rifle slowly, his shoulders still tense. She crawled to him, her hands shaking as she gripped his arm. Her voice broke with disbelief. You didn't give me to them." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "I told you. You're under my roof now. No one takes you from here." Her eyes filled with tears. She had begged for years to be seen, to be given a place, to be worth protecting. And now, in the warmth of his cabin, she finally was. She pressed her forehead to the sleeve of his coat, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." But even as her heart filled with a warmth she had never known, fear lingered. The raiders would return. They would bring more, stronger, angrier. She knew they would not stop until they had her back. And now, because of her, the human was in danger too. She pulled back, her eyes red, and whispered, "They will come again. You should not keep me here. I will only bring you death." The human gave a short, cold laugh. "Death has knocked on my door before. It's never walked away smiling." Her heart pounded as she looked at him. For the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she was not a burden. Maybe she was someone worth saving. The cabin glowed with firelight, and though danger loomed outside, inside she felt something stronger than fear. She felt like she belonged. The days after the attack were heavy with silence. The girl stayed close to the fire, afraid that if she stepped too far from its warmth, everything she had gained would vanish. The human spent his time repairing the cabin, checking the door, and setting traps around the trees outside. He moved with steady hands, calm but sharp, like a man who had lived through too many battles. She watched him while he worked, guilt pressing hard in her chest. She knew the raiders would return. She knew she had brought danger to his door, yet he did not send her away. He let her stay, and more than that, he made room for her in the small cabin as if she belonged. One afternoon, he handed her a wooden stick sharpened into a spear. "If they come back, you'll need to fight." he said. His voice was not cruel, only practical. Her hands shook as she took it. I am not strong, she whispered. He studied her, then gave a small nod. Strength comes when you stand for something worth more than yourself. His words stayed in her heart. For 10 years, she had only stood for survival. She had never believed herself worth fighting for, but now she was under his roof, under his protection. Maybe she could learn to fight not just for herself, but for him too. That night, snow fell thick against the windows, covering the world in white silence. The human worked on a small trap near the door while she tried to help. She gathered broken wood, stacked it neatly, and handed him tools when he asked. At first, her movements were clumsy, but slowly she grew steadier. When she dropped something, he didn't scold her. He showed her how to hold it better. For the first time, she felt useful. Not a burden, not a shadow. When they sat by the fire later, she spoke softly, her eyes lowered. I want to thank you, not just for the blanket, not just for food, for letting me stay. The human glanced at her, his face unreadable, then looked back at the flames. You needed help. I gave it. She shook her head, clutching the blanket closer. No, others saw me, others turned away, but you did not. Her voice cracked. That is more than help, that is life. The fire crackled between them. The human didn't answer right away, but his eyes softened in the glow. He was a man used to walls. Walls around his home, walls around his heart. But something in her words pushed against those walls. Later that night, as the wind howled outside, she curled close to the fire again. But this time, she did not tremble from fear. She felt something new, a warmth that was not from the flames alone. It was from the presence of someone who had chosen to see her, to keep her safe. She could not sleep. Her thoughts spun with memories and with hope. Slowly, she whispered into the quiet, You gave me more than a bed. You gave me a reason to live. The human heard her, though she thought he was asleep. His eyes opened in the dim firelight, and he watched her. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened, the way his chest rose with a breath he didn't know he was holding. He said nothing, but in his silence, something changed. The next morning, they worked together. She followed him into the snow, carrying wood while he checked traps and set up defenses around the cabin. The cold bit at her, but she did not complain. She wanted to show him she was not helpless, that she could share his burden. He glanced at her more than once, surprised at her effort, at her stubborn will. When she stumbled, he caught her arm before she fell. She looked up at him, her breath white in the air, and for a moment their eyes met. She quickly lowered her gaze, but her heart beat faster. The days grew into a rhythm. He taught her small things, how to stack wood properly, how to hold a knife, how to listen for sounds beyond the storm. She learned quickly, eager to prove herself, and in return, she brought small light into the cabin. She smiled sometimes, even laughed once when he slipped on the ice. The sound startled him. It had been so long since laughter had lived in that cabin. But peace was fragile. One evening, as the sky darkened and the fire burned low, the glow of torches appeared outside in the distance. Her breath caught in her throat. The raiders. They had returned. This time there were more of them. Their shadows moved like black teeth across the snow. She froze, clutching the blanket, her body stiff with fear. They came back, she whispered. The human stood, calm but sharp, lifting his rifle. He glanced at her once. Stay low. Remember the spear. Her hands shook, but she nodded. She would not run. Not this time. The torches drew closer, their voices echoing across the snow. Human, give her up. You cannot protect her forever. The human stepped to the door, his voice steady and cold. I don't need forever. I only need tonight. Her heart pounded as she watched him, a lone figure standing against the storm, ready to face them all. She wanted to scream at him to run, to save himself, but another voice rose inside her. No, she would not beg him to abandon her. Not again. She would stand too. Her grip tightened on the spear. She crawled closer to the door, her body shaking but her eyes fierce. For the first time in her life, she was not only a girl begging for shelter. She was someone ready to fight for the home she had been given, for the man who had given her hope. The torches stopped just beyond the trees. Silence fell heavy, the kind that comes before a storm breaks. The human's rifle was steady. Her spear shook in her hands, but she held it firm. In that moment, she realized something. The bed, the blanket, the fire. Those were gifts of comfort. But this, standing side by side, ready to face the enemy, this was the gift she had prayed for most of all. She was no longer alone. The raiders shouted again, their voices promising blood. The human did not flinch, and though her heart screamed with fear, she found herself whispering the same words he had once told her. Strength comes when you stand for something worth more than yourself. The firelight danced on their faces as the night prepared to break into war. The night exploded with sound. The raiders charged from the trees, their torches waving like fire spirits in the storm. Their boots slammed into the snow, weapons raised, voices filled with rage. The girl's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might break her chest. She gripped the spear in both hands, her knuckles white, her legs trembling, but she did not run. The human stood at the door, rifle ready, his face hard and steady. He fired the first shot, and one of the raiders fell into the snow with a cry. The others screamed in fury and rushed forward. The door shook as fists and shoulders slammed into it, but the heavy wood held. Smoke from their torches drifted through the cracks, mixing with the glow of the cabin fire. "Stay back," the human ordered, his voice calm even in the chaos. But she did not stay back. She crawled to the wall, pressing her eye to a crack between the planks. She saw the faces of her kind outside, faces twisted with anger, faces that had once called her worthless. They had abandoned her to die, and now they wanted to drag her back. For the first time, she did not feel only fear. She felt anger too. The raiders smashed against the shutters, trying to break through. The wood splintered, and one hand forced its way inside. Without thinking, she thrust the spear forward. The sharp tip cut across the raider's arm, and he screamed, pulling back into the snow. Her breath came fast and heavy. She had struck back. She had not been helpless. The human glanced at her and gave the smallest nod as if to say, "Good." The battle raged for long minutes. Shots cracked, wood shook, voices cursed. The cabin was small, but it was strong, and the man knew how to defend it. Still, the raiders were many, and with every strike against the door, she felt the danger closing in. At last, with a loud crack, one of the shutters burst open. A raider forced himself halfway through, his blade gleaming in the firelight. The girl screamed, lifting the spear again. But before the raider could swing, the human pulled him inside with sudden strength and struck him down with the butt of his rifle. The man's body collapsed against the floor, and the cabin filled with the smell of blood and smoke. The others outside howled in rage. "You cannot hold forever," they shouted. "We will burn you out." Her body shook at those words. Fire. She remembered the night her family was lost, the night flames swallowed her home, the night she had been left behind in the snow. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let go of the spear. She whispered to herself over and over, "Not this time, not this time." The human poured water over the door edges, preparing for fire. He glanced at her, his voice strong. "We fight together." Those words lit something inside her. For years she had begged for one warm bed, for one night of shelter. She had thought that would be enough. But now she knew what she had truly wanted, someone to stand beside her, someone who would not abandon her, no matter how hard the world turned. The raiders pushed again, harder, but the traps outside slowed them. One screamed as he fell into a pit hidden under the snow. Another cried out when iron spikes snapped around his leg. The human had prepared well, but still, they came. The door cracked, wood breaking under their weight. She looked at the human, fear sharp in her chest. "They will break through." He met her eyes, calm even now. "Then we hold this place until they cannot stand." The door split open, snow and firelight rushing inside. The raiders stormed through, shouting. The human fired again, his movements fast and sure. She raised her spear, thrusting at anyone who came near. For the first time, she did not feel like a ghost in the world. She felt alive, every heartbeat like thunder, every breath filled with purpose. One raider lunged at her, his blade raised. She screamed and drove the spear into his side. He fell back, cursing, clutching the wound. Her body shook with terror, but also with strength. She had done it. She had fought back. The cabin became a storm of fire and blood. The human moved like iron, striking, pushing, defending. She stayed close to him, her spear flashing in the firelight. Together, they forced the raiders back, step by step, until the survivors stumbled out into the snow. At last, silence fell. The door hung broken, smoke curling through the air. Bodies lay in the snow. their torches dying. The rest had fled into the storm, their voices fading into the distance. The girl dropped the spear, her arms too weak to hold it. She fell to her knees, gasping for breath, her body trembling from fear and exhaustion. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not only from terror, they were from victory. For the first time in her life, she had not been left behind. The human stood over her, breathing hard, his clothes marked with blood and ash. He looked down at her, his eyes steady. "It's over," he said. She shook her head weakly. "They will come again. They will never stop." He crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll fight again. Together." Her heart broke and healed in the same moment. She looked into his eyes, the firelight glowing in them, and she whispered, "You gave me one night, but I want every night now." His silence was answer enough. He helped her to her feet, guiding her back to the fire. The cabin was damaged, the world outside still dangerous, but inside it was warm. Inside, she was no longer a beggar, no longer a shadow. She was someone who had fought, someone who had been chosen, someone who belonged. She curled once more near the flames, the blanket around her shoulders, her body sore but alive. The human sat beside her, his rifle leaning against the wall, his presence solid and unshakable. As the storm outside swallowed the last echoes of the raiders, she closed her eyes. For 10 years she had prayed for one warm bed, one night of shelter. Now she knew she would never face the cold alone again.